Hi, everyone. How are you? So, this is the second installment on Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. So, I was thinking, where could I go to film this? So, I decided to do it in front of an authentic Japanese Buddhist, Zen Buddhist tea house, which is behind me. This was, in fact, built in Kyoto Prefecture, which is, I think Kyoto, I could be mistaken, but has more shrines, more temples than anywhere else in Japan. They're not just Buddhist and Buddhist, but also Shinto as well. And also, I thought it would be kind of fun. This is actually in the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, where I've been before. Apparently, this was built in Kyoto and then taken to a private residence at Hope Ranch. So remember, we were at Hope Ranch where I noted how they had, in essence, made this area into a private beach, this very wealthy community. Well, apparently that's where it was, and ultimately it was donated here, much to our benefit. So, Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. A few things. I'm curious to hear what you think of the second part and the conclusion and the work as a whole, which I invite you to talk about. One thing that should be apparent now, I mentioned how this was less about religion and more about sort of practice, a way of living life. You probably get the idea that this is really in a very, nuts and bolts way about practice, about how to live your life. Things like how to interact with your parents, for example, which takes part of this. So in that sense, this book, certainly more than I think any sort of religious manual, is sort of a self-help book, sort of a how-to manual for the self, although in both cases, we have to qualify it, right, because the self, there is no self in the same way that we think of it in the Western dualistic tradition here. The other thing I wanted to note about the book, is how Thich Nhat Hanh has had a role in the climate crisis. And he's one of those characters, you may have never heard of him before, but I mentioned that over 50 years ago, he played a role in the peace movement in the United States by actually getting his friend Dr. Martin Luther King to engage with the war in Vietnam for the first time. He also, Thich Nhat Hanh, also had a role to play in COP21, and a major one, actually. So you probably, if you're familiar with COP21, again, this is where the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015, and this was the first really solid climate agreement that the 190 plus countries of the world agreed upon. And it's important, and if you remember, Kim Stanley Robinson keeps referencing it again and again, because the way he imagines in the future, we're still talking about COP21 decades from now. That's how important it was, because it really solidified the nations of the world. But how did all those countries come together, and what did it? Well, if you're familiar with COP21, you're probably familiar with the figure of Christiana Figueroa. I'll just call her Christiana, because I won't have problems with her last name the way I just did. And that's how she's referenced in the book. She actually was a student of Thich Nhat Hanh. And in fact, because of a personal crisis, she began studying at one of the meditation centers in Europe, the one in Germany, which is near where she was when she was preparing for COP21. And many of the techniques that she learned as far as negotiating, she learned from Thich Nhat Hanh. And I say that not from me analyzing it, but having heard her interviewed about it, and heard her talking about the role that he played. It was very important because for these 190 plus nations to come together, someone had to bring them together. She did that. She actually went, I think for the great majority of the countries, to each and individual country, met with the leaders there that would be negotiating, and tried to get them on the same page. And that's quite a remarkable achievement. It had never happened before. We had thought that, it was going to happen in the late 1990s and all, but it didn't. She was really the first one to do it. And in the book, Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet, you can actually see Sister True Dedication talking about that and the importance of it. So I won't go on long here. It's a fascinating book, and it's a fascinating approach because, again, it is a self-help book in a way, getting us thinking about what we can do for, individually, but then how we interact with each other, how we can come together and work toward this goal, which remarkably COP21 did, and remarkably Thich Nhat Hanh is in part in the background of there, which is pretty fascinating. So speaking of backgrounds, I'll let you see that one more time. Isn't that a beautiful little building? It's the aesthetics are quite nice, and the setting here is quite nice as well. Okay, so that's it for this week. I really am deeply curious, and I've been very much enjoying. I enjoy every week your comments, but I've really been enjoying those regarding the first part of Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. So I can't wait to read your thoughts on the second part. Okay, thanks.